Hey guys, welcome to my personal YouTube space. I am an IT professional, and I have probably 10 to 15 years of paid experience that translates into modest success. And the purpose of the video here is having learned about a lot of interesting certificates in the field of IT. I can say that it's a bit overwhelming, and frankly, the technologies that are out there do actually evolve from fundamentals, and so I um, wanted to cover what I know and what can help somebody who didn't think of IT as a professional career, but now is more and more curious about it and maybe even overwhelmed. Um, the way I got started, frankly, was basically like many people, got hired by a company and was trained on a specific software tool. But having worked in journalism in the past and in a production environment, I realized that really there's a couple things to this whole picture, and that is some of it is basic publishing. When you go and you use a software application, it's kind of like opening a newspaper. Um, so what goes on, you know, at the publishing level is very similar to what goes on, in the IT department of any company. So I want to start with just talking about my progression into IT for 30 seconds, which is I did, you know, go to a liberal arts college. I did go to a competitive one, learned newspaper publishing, and started developing an understanding of how production facilities and newspapers and then later digital media get set up. Because as you know, there are little details that go into publishing that not everybody understands. We know there's a company that processes the newspapers, you know, and then people that deliver the newspaper. But we also know that every department in the newspaper is very interrelated, but with its own specialty. So you'll have a photographer that is in charge of, taking thousands of shots, and you'll have a photo editor, and those of us in the production environment have to reconcile the quality and the captions, the words, the size of the photo, the color, and all those things. And that in and of itself covers a couple of software technologies that we know of today, which are very, very profitable and very huge employers. Um, so having grown up outside of Washington, D.C., and having worked for a good high school newspaper and having had to go, in the middle of the night to publish newspapers during high school and try to get grades and go to college, yada, yada, I have firsthand experience and understanding. I've got to go and I've got to write photo descriptions, headlines, you know, print them out on this huge, machine that prints, words on this wax paper that then gets copied onto a newspaper. But the whole point is I had to actually dig down into the size of, columns, the sizes of headlines, the sizes of photographs, design that. And again, various departments were involved. There was an artistic department, someone who drew things, someone who photographed things. And again, I know that having grown in that environment and having worked with people that worked every day in the newspaper, whether it was professionals at USA Today or some kind of trade publication, everybody was involved in delivering messages. But the big players, as you know, are Adobe today. And it has been the case for many years that a lot of us, got picked and pulled in one direction. Do we focus on media content, like from the artistic scenario, or do we focus on what you might call the production environment, which kind of integrates your media with words? So clearly, you know, I feel that I'm a generalist. And as a consequence, when talking about learning some basic skills, you want to dumb it down to a level that is even less complicated than you can imagine. Because at the end of the day, the person who works in the artistic department is going to tell you need 3 years experience working in art department. Or to work at Adobe, you're going to need 3 years experience in photography and computer and desktop publishing and design and so on. Not really. What they're saying is you really do have to have experience in understanding the basics and fundamentals of production, of photography, um, and some exposure to how a picture goes from being a a piece of memory on your camera to a magazine or to the web. And those fundamentals are things you can learn. You take out a ruler and you can measure the size of a picture in terms of how the newspaper business or how the publisher looks at it. It doesn't look at it in inches. It looks at it in terms like, points or points. And what is the other terminology? I think it's like, pixels and so on. But those are little things that you can learn in detail and understand that, gosh, there's a lot of stuff that's hands-on. It's not just IT. So in this first introduction to IT that I'm doing, I'm giving you a very basic understanding of everything that goes into IT that has nothing to do with all the things that you might think it has to do, whether it's programming or engineering or networking, that have really at the end of the day, if you don't have information like a photograph or an email, you really don't have IT, right? And the purpose is, if I want to publish an article in the Washingtonian magazine, then I have to submit an article for approval. It has to be edited, and it has to wait until the end of the month when it's published. So although the IT department today is not comprised entirely of authors or entirely of photographers, the idea of presenting something or marketing something is the heart of IT. And at the end of the day, you have to understand that IT is really about that. It's the communication of an object. Fast forward to somebody who has a little bit of advanced knowledge of computers, and you could talk about object-oriented programming, which is, in theory, the idea that, well, if I'm going to publish something like a newspaper, a magazine, and in general, I can always use the same size of a photograph and the same size of a headline and the same size of a artistic icon and the same color of font on an advertisement or the same size for a headline. Well, then I only have to program the size once, and I can call it object A. Object B will be the size of the number of words in a caption for a photograph. Object C might be the size of a box, a little outline of an article that I've written. And object C might be the size of the entire newspaper. Those in general are the principles of object-oriented programming, right? It's the principle of using a template, a standard for communicating my message. Now, you can take, all sorts of programming classes and learn about diversification of your objects, diversification of your presentation, which is to say, a software tool might say, please count the number of words in an article, or please count the number of words in an entire newspaper. And it might require a few patterns of code, such as count the number of lines, count the number of average words per line, and basic, what you might call routines, basic functions, right? Now, as you develop from an entry-level consumer of data to an entry-level, artistic design person for IT, or a contributor to an IT or a media outlet, you may decide that you want to delve into understanding the programming, right? But I think the easiest way to understand it is that big picture. Now, moving on a little bit for the in-between stages, how come people spend years and years of time and money on various programs or education levels and so on. It's because at the end of the day, there is a demand for it. And the more people that, get interested, the more schools are going to pop up. But because IT is always evolving, we're going to have various levels of experts. Some might be an expert in the photography. Some might be experts in the, how do I transmit a photograph over the internet with something called internetworking, or what you might call like system engineering, network engineering, designing the engineer. How far does the picture have to travel over this little cable? How many people does it have to go to? How do I get it set up with the local phone company or YouTube or my iPhone? So you can have people that specialize on what you might call the internet, right? The networking. How do I get computers set up so they talk to each other in a private session or a public session? So I mentioned that because at the beginning of this IT world that I experienced, IT was either you're kind of on the network side or you're kind of on what's called the application. What is this application doing? But at a fundamental level, what you'll learn is that eventually you do have to distinguish between programming for Windows, which is a common place to go to program, or programming in a vendor neutral environment or an open environment. And those things really matter fundamentally because unfortunately, the way technology is evolving, you either can become really good at one or the other. But fundamentally, programming is something that's agnostic. I can learn to program an application and put it in one environment or the other. But at the end of the day, I still want to learn a little bit about the program. So there are places to go for free information about, programming. And there are places you can go to get free information about networking, but you should start with understanding that you should decide which place to focus your attention. I would urge, generally speaking, that you understand that IT is not networking, and it's not developing, and it's not photography. It's not any one thing. So don't be misled by people that give you a Cisco certification, a Windows Unix certification. Windows certification or Unix certification. Try to learn, generally speaking, what you're interested in. And what I found myself naturally evolving into was developing web pages. Now, the beauty about developing web pages is that it's very similar to using basic Microsoft Word or Adobe, or, as I was saying back in the day, publishing a newspaper. I just need to size up the thing, draw the space where the thing goes, draw the page size, find somewhere to write the words, whether it's Microsoft Notepad, whether it's Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel, write it down, and then decide, do I want, a lot of graphics and images? And, do I want to create menus that link to other pages? Well, those are the basic steps. Understanding that a web page is really like a book. It's got page 1, the home page 2, about us, page 3, more information, page 4, products, page 5, miscellaneous. I'm talking about your newspaper, your magazine, yourself, your business, whatever you're doing. So if you're able to understand that, the web and developing web pages is a good place to start, well, the resources are still complicated. The resources involve graphic design school, IT schools, and so on. But you should be able to do this part-time on your lunch break instead of, eating lunch, by yourself somewhere or in a group of friends, at a bar, restaurant, 20 minutes a day, reading something online or finding something at the library should speed things up. So what I wanted to talk about was how to get started with programming in the most fundamental way available to us, which is website design. So we've talked about the website as a page, as a book of pages, and we've talked about, generally speaking, the excitement about this process, how it goes from creation, from anybody's idea to something that you can use patterns and templates, or what they call object-oriented design. And the books that I used focused on the fundamentals of designing the web page and putting it together in a specific way using the language for the internet, which is called markup language for web pages. It's a markup language. So instead of typing right onto the word pad a couple of paragraphs, I actually have to say start paragraph, end paragraph, start 11 point sized, New York Times font. I want to use a specific font, end it, start italics, end it. It's not just typing, right? And I don't want to go from the absolute edge of the paper to the middle of the paper. I want it to go a quarter of the way or halfway or all the way across. So I have to set up, this agreement with my computer screen that please don't print and just all across, have a little bit of flavor style. Please center it a little bit. If I'm going to do that, I've got to use the markup language. Please center my paper. If I want to link to another page, I have to say URL, the uniform reference link. I have to say start the link here, end the link here, so that when I click on the particular word, it's going to take me to the beginning of the next page. So at the next page, I'm going to have a different, piece of information. These are basic principles of markup language and code. And my job here in this introductory video is to raise awareness about the fundamentals of getting started in IT without spending a lot of money, without deciding to major in IT, without making that commitment to, I don't have any real commitment to understanding what I'm getting myself into, and then realizing, well, I'm a network engineer and that's all I can do. And IT has evolved into so many different perspectives that I'm really just, instead of going into it thinking that I can make $100,000 a year, well, now I've come out of it and things are different now, and I'm going to make $10 an hour. I think my first IT job was making $10 an hour. And this was working for a Fortune 50 company. And all I was doing was learning how to select items from a database of various publications. This is like a publishing company, and they didn't want to store everything, in these, dusty old moldy magazines. They wanted somebody to scan them, put them into a, some kind of database, and and instead of looking them up, you'd find them. You'd find these PDFs, you'd find these scanned copies of articles, and then in the computer. You remember microfiche, but now it was evolving into more of like a actual like reader type environment, or actual like unprinted version of what was stored somewhere in the basement of some government building. Well, I had to learn about, okay, well, how do I get my computer to find a specific document? And I understood it had to do with the session numbers, the records. Anybody can get started in IT, and anybody who's thought about what they want to do for a living, has an understanding that at the end of the day, automation in IT is part of most jobs, whether it's librarian, whether it's, accounting, legal field, they must have some automation required as well, because they rely on, historical texts and data. Now, that being said, you don't have to think about switching careers to start IT, but you can certainly improve your chances of switching your career when you do start learning these skills. And it's very easy to start developing skills. And my goal is to let you know, okay, there are free resources out there. I'm going to be putting some together, and I'm going to do some basic trainings. And my goal is over the next 3 weeks to produce, 3 weeks worth of information. Initially, the consumption is going to be free, but I'm going to ask you to donate, to the channel, so that, at the end of the day, like, it's a win-win situation. I'll be able to produce material that is really detail-oriented and something that you can start working I could even be your online mentor and, remind you of the basics, remind you of how things are related. How am I supposed to learn programming when I've never learned to program? So I've taken a class. I was lucky in that first computer job that I had an employer sponsored education. So I actually took a class on databases. And then I think I took a class on IT and a class in programming because I wanted to know, could I get a master's in IT even if I only had a bachelor's in a non-IT subject? And the reality was, yeah, it's really important to learn the fundamentals of what, you know, managing IT is. You're not going to become a developer unless you wanted to, but even then you want to understand the fundamentals and where IT stops and starts. It starts with a photograph, a piece of paper, purchase order, an invoice, accounting record, a sales receipt, a description for a job if you're publishing a job manual, a description for a newspaper article if you're publishing an online newsletter. It starts with content. Okay. Now, where we are today, in terms of developing websites, it's a vague thing we talk about, but if it's content based, you'll find a system for content where you can pay some money and you can develop your own code. It's my goal that you'll use my resources, which I own, possess, and you get your training on that. And instead of paying, $50 up front and $50 a month to do that, I I reserve the right to charge you $1 a day, or $1 for every time you sign up, or $4 a day for any day you want to use it. The whole point is, again, you can go out there and pop open a page in GoDaddy and pop open a page over here, and you still don't understand, what's going on, and you're not really going to go far as a, content delivery manager or a content developer or a programmer or an IT, developer, simply by having a website that you basically don't understand the ins and outs of. And that's been the onus of this program for me for many years, because I did ultimately get hired to manage websites, to develop code. And I realized that I did need some training. I couldn't use something that was popular. Like, I couldn't use GoDaddy because my employer was using a more complex system to put up web pages. So again, it does cost money to do things, but you can use shared services. I can actually share services with you guys and quickly offer you some exercises and stuff. So again, I hope this gives you a general idea of what to expect when you start thinking about switching careers or continuing your education and learning more about IT. My name is Eddie. It's late in the day. You have better things to do than to be, stressed about your career. But if you don't do anything about it, that stress could start taking up more of your time and attention. You may decide to drop $1,000 on a course instead of going on a vacation, where, you might actually do better for yourself than spend money and still not know the basics. So appreciate your attention. Look for these videos, subscribe. You'll notice that I'm an avid follower of sports activities, and I also trade stocks and bonds part-time for a living, having worked in the IT department of a bank for some time and had some leisure time. But you might find a video or two about that passion I have as well. My goal is really to start by saying, look, the more that I go out on the web, the more places I see free things or expensive things. And I wanted to create this like little portal where you can say, well, I learned about the various costs, but I also learned about how to get free information on what I'm getting into and how to distinguish it in a way that everybody can more thoroughly understand. So hit the like button. Please post something on the chat if you liked it, and we'll continue. Thank you.